Some of the Republican leaders who tried to overturn the 2020 presidential election are now calling on Congress to pass what they're calling an election integrity bill. They say the new legislation will prevent non-citizens from voting in U.S. elections, something that multiple studies have repeatedly shown is exceedingly rare. The measure would make it more difficult to register people to vote by requiring the verification of a U.S. passport or birth certificate. Voting rights advocates note that millions of Americans do not have easy access to those documents. House Speaker Mike Johnson, who's leading the effort, played a pivotal role in former President Trump's push to overturn the election 4 years ago. Joining us now, Moynihan Public Scholar Fellow at the City College of New York, Professor Christina Greer. Professor, good to see you this morning.
Always.
Of course, it is hypocrisy that these election deniers are calling for election integrity. But let's talk about these efforts. And should we be worried about their mechanics to prevent voters from voting, but also what it says big picture about how a significant portion of one party views the democratic process in America and their efforts to undercut it?
Yeah, Jonathan, we should always be worried when people move the goalposts. But if we zoom out, we can look at Republicans and recognize that the vast majority of their policies just aren't in lockstep with what Americans want. And that's why they have to keep making it more difficult for Americans to have access to the ballot. We've seen this time and time again, whether it's, trying to decrease mail-in voting or whether it's trying to make it much more difficult for young people to vote or older people to vote. This is going at the heart of their foundation where, only certain people are the real Americans. But when you look at the issues, whether it's LGBTQ plus rights, where more and more Americans are becoming more inclusive and accepted. When you look at abortion, which is a huge issue, not just in Ohio, but in states like Michigan and Wisconsin, where they definitely need votes. They know that they are just not on the right side of history, and they're not on the right side of the ballot box, so they have to make it much more difficult for people to have access.
So President Biden was in Wisconsin yesterday, mostly on economic issues, which, polls suggest he's struggling to win over voters with. But afterwards, he gave that interview, and he did talk about Donald Trump in the next election. And he more or less said, I guarantee that he won't accept the result were he to lose. How would you counsel the president to continue to speak about this? Because on one hand, polls suggest it's the kitchen table issues that are going to decide this election, as well as things like you mentioned, abortion. But like democracy, the president believes is at stake. How does he balance that in his messaging?
It's really hard, Jonathan, because so many Americans are really worried about the bottom line. But when you think about what Joe Biden is trying to lay out, if you have someone who believes in a dictatorship, if you have someone who believes in grifting, if you have someone who believes in giving, parts of Americans' economy to the highest bidder, especially our foreign adversaries, that is a pocketbook issue. What will happen to labor in this country? What will happen to jobs? What will happen to our educational system for people to actually have prospects for jobs? So Joe Biden's asking people to have both a short-term and a long-term conversation. The long-term conversation is not something that we've been great at as a nation. We've got a very short-term memory when we go to the ballot box. But we are literally looking at a Republican candidate who's saying that he will not respect the will of law. He's saying that he will enrich himself and his friends. He is saying all the things that he's going to do to immigrants, to vulnerable communities, to marginalized communities. And there's unfortunately a large swath of Americans who don't believe him, and there's a large swath of Americans who actually support him.
And lastly, we showed some polls earlier in the show basically a dead heat between Biden and Trump in a couple of key battleground states. But it was also striking that third-party candidate Robert F. Kennedy Jr. was in the double digits, 12 to 13, 17% in these numbers. Do we think, is that real? Do you think, is he going to actually pick up those votes? Or is that an anger that people are expressing now because they're not happy with the choices? And who do you think he would hurt most?
Yeah, Jonathan, it's hard to say. This reminds me of 1992 with Ross Perot. Don't forget, Ross Perot got almost 19 million votes, but no electoral college votes. But he definitely affected the race, especially for George H.W. Bush. So, as we sort of continue with our interventions abroad and people feel pocketbook issues at home, I think that conversation in closer to October will be much more clear as to the effect of RFK Jr. and the worm in his head.
And the worm in his head. On that note, we will leave it. Moynihan Public Scholar Fellow at the City College of New York, Professor Christina Greer, thank you as always.